The Galactic Empire, vast and ancient, had stretched its dominion across the stars for millennia. It thrived on the subjugation of lesser species, folding them into its relentless machine of order and conquest. Its warriors, the vanguard elite, were legends in their own right, genetically enhanced and honed by centuries of martial tradition. These soldiers were the Empire's pride, their very existence a testament to the Empire's unmatched strength. For the Empire, conflict was a dance they choreographed, victory inevitable and resistance futile. But this time, the dance faltered. The threat came without warning, a creeping darkness that devoured entire star systems. Where once vibrant trade routes pulsed with activity, now only silence reigned. Initial probes sent to investigate vanished without a trace. When the Empire finally engaged, their fleets were obliterated by an enemy they neither understood nor could anticipate. The foe wasn't another empire or rogue faction, it was something far worse. They were an alien species, biomechanical monstrosities that adapted to every tactic, countered every strategy. For the first time in centuries, the Empire found itself overmatched. The Emperor convened an emergency war council in the Imperial Citadel, a fortress carved from the living rock of a neutron star. Hundreds of warlords and strategists filled the grand chamber, their voices rising in heated debate. At the center stood High Marshal Vorex, commander of the vanguard elite. His crimson armor gleamed under the chamber's harsh light as he addressed the assembly with a voice like grinding steel. "We will send our greatest champions," Vorex declared. "They have never failed us. They will not fail now." The decision was unanimous. Across the Empire's countless worlds, the call went out. The vanguard's finest would be deployed to confront the threat. Their mission: obliteration. Their expected outcome: triumph. And yet, far from the Imperial core, on a small blue planet that had only recently joined the interstellar stage, another decision was being made. Earth was new to the galaxy, its people considered a curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst. Humanity's introduction to the greater galactic community had been awkward and often contentious. They lacked the technological refinement of older species, and their history of internal conflict made them seem unstable. But they had a knack for survival, a stubborn refusal to quit that some species found baffling. It was this trait that led the Empire to include them, begrudgingly, in the coalition against the alien threat. When the directive reached Earth, humanity faced a choice. The Empire demanded only one representative, reasoning that humans had neither the resources nor the expertise to contribute meaningfully. Politicians debated furiously, military leaders argued over candidates, and scientists scrambled to understand the enemy. In the end, the choice fell to one individual, Elias Kane. Elias was not the strongest soldier nor the most decorated. He was no brilliant scientist or cunning diplomat. What he was, however, was relentless. A combat veteran with a reputation for unconventional thinking, Elias had spent years in Earth Special Forces before retiring to train recruits. His superiors often remarked that he fought like someone with nothing to lose, yet his instincts were razor-sharp, his strategies unorthodox but effective. When told of the mission, he didn't hesitate. "I'll go," he said simply, as if volunteering for a routine patrol instead of what might be a one-way trip. As the human delegation prepared Elias for departure, whispers spread among the Empire's warriors. They mocked the decision to send one human, a lone figure amid their ranks of genetically enhanced champions. The vanguard viewed him as little more than a distraction, an obligation the Empire was forced to endure. Yet Elias remained unfazed. He spent the journey studying, poring over every scrap of intelligence on the alien enemy, analyzing the vanguard's tactics, and searching for gaps, flaws, opportunities. If the Empire had made a mistake in underestimating humanity, Elias intended to make them regret it. The alien menace revealed itself in the outer reaches of the Zythar sector. A fleet of Empire warships arrived first, their imposing bulk bristling with weaponry. Elias stood on the bridge of the flagship, surrounded by towering vanguard warriors, each one a living weapon in their own right. He was an anomaly in their midst, clad in a simple, functional combat suit compared to their ornate, gleaming armor. As the enemy came into view, a hush fell over the bridge. The alien fleet was unlike anything they had imagined, organic vessels pulsating with eerie bioluminescence, constantly shifting and reconfiguring. The vanguard commander sneered. "Primitive. They rely on instinct. We will crush them. Elias said nothing, but his eyes narrowed. Instinct was never something to be underestimated. The battle began, and the Empire's forces surged forward with precision. The vanguard elite launched themselves into the fray, their weapons cutting through alien ranks with brutal efficiency. At first, it seemed the Empire's confidence was well placed. But then the enemy adapted. Alien forms began to counter their moves, weapons reconfigured to exploit weaknesses, and strategies unraveled. The vanguard found themselves not just fighting but struggling, a sensation they had never experienced. Elias observed, his mind racing. Where the vanguard saw chaos, he saw patterns. He noticed how the alien forces reacted to specific stimuli, how they prioritized targets, how they moved as if guided by a singular, hive-like intelligence. While the vanguard grew more frustrated, Elias acted. Shift the fire pattern. Create a diversion on the left flank, he instructed over the comms. The vanguard commander glared. You dare. Do it, Elias snapped, his voice cold and certain. Or we all die. Reluctantly, the commander obeyed. The shift bought the Empire precious moments, destabilizing the alien advance. Elias continued issuing commands, each one precise and unorthodox, each one buying time. When the battle ended, it wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. The Empire's fleet had survived, barely. In the aftermath, Elias found himself facing High Marshal Vorex. The towering figure loomed over him, radiating disdain. You got lucky, Vorex said. Elias met his gaze without flinching. Maybe. But luck's just preparation meeting opportunity. And we're going to need a lot more of both if we want to win. For a moment, Vorex said nothing. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Elias standing alone on the bloodied battlefield, the faint flicker of alien bioluminescence still glowing in the distance. The alien threat loomed larger with each passing day, spreading like a living plague across the galaxy. The Empire's vast resources and unshakable confidence had never been tested so severely. Every engagement with the enemy felt like a gamble, with victories bought at staggering costs and defeats leaving scars across entire sectors. The vanguard elite, once symbols of invincibility, now found themselves questioning their every move. Among them, Elias Kane, the lone human, continued to defy expectations. Elias was not an imposing figure, certainly not compared to the towering vanguard warriors who dwarfed him in both stature and reputation. Yet he moved through their ranks with quiet determination, a figure apart yet undeniably essential. Where the vanguard relied on brute force and meticulously rehearsed tactics, Elias brought something the Empire had long since forgotten, improvisation born of necessity. In the aftermath of their initial battle, tensions simmered between Elias and the Empire's champions. They resented his growing influence, whispering among themselves about his audacity. To them, he was an anomaly, a wild card in a system that valued precision and predictability. Yet, begrudgingly, they began to follow his lead. Elias's unconventional strategies, though alien to the Empire's doctrine, had saved lives. And in this war, survival was the closest thing to victory they could claim. The next engagement came on a desolate moon in the Sereth system. The alien invaders had fortified themselves there, their biomechanical structures burrowing deep into the moon's crust. Imperial forces descended en masse, their arrival marked by the thunderous roar of engines and the blaze of orbital bombardments. The vanguard charged forward with characteristic ferocity, their gleaming armor reflecting the inferno of battle. Elias watched from the command ridge, his eyes scanning the battlefield for the patterns only he seemed to notice. "Why do you hesitate, human?" Commander Thaler growled, his voice a low rumble. "The vanguard does not wait. We strike." Elias turned to face him, unfazed by the commander's imposing presence. "And you've lost half your squads in every engagement so far. Maybe it's time to stop relying on what used to work and start figuring out what will." Thaler's fists clenched, but he said nothing. The human's words stung because they were true. The vanguard's once unassailable tactics were failing against an enemy that learned too quickly. Elias pointed toward a series of narrow canyons winding through the moon's surface. "The aliens adapt to direct assaults. We can't outmuscle them, but we can outthink them. Force them into the canyons. Funnel them into tight spaces where their numbers mean nothing. Thaler sneered. A coward's strategy. No, Elias said firmly. It's a survivor's strategy. You're fighting the war you want, not the war you're in. If we keep doing that, we lose. All of us. Reluctantly, the vanguard followed his plan. They lured the alien forces into the labyrinthine canyons, where the Empire's heavy artillery couldn't be countered, and their formations were neutralized. The battle was brutal, every inch of ground contested with teeth and claws, but the tide began to turn. For the first time, the Empire achieved a decisive victory. Afterward, the vanguard gathered around their encampment, battered but alive. Thaler approached Elias, his expression inscrutable. You were right, he admitted, though the words tasted bitter. This time. Elias didn't gloat. He simply nodded. Let's make sure there's a next time. But not everyone was so willing to accept his methods. High Marshal Vorex summoned Elias to the command ship, where he was met with cold stares and thinly veiled hostility. The chamber was suffused with the weight of disapproval as Vorex leaned forward, his crimson armor catching the harsh light. You presume to lead, Vorex said, his voice low and dangerous. To dictate terms to warriors who have fought and bled for the Empire longer than your kind has even touched the stars. Elias stood his ground. I'm not here to lead. I'm here to win. If that means stepping on a few egos along the way, so be it. The silence that followed was electric, the kind that could shatter or solidify an alliance. Finally, Vorex leaned back, his expression unreadable. We shall see if your methods endure. The next confrontation was unlike any before it. The aliens unveiled a new weapon, colossal constructs of living metal that absorbed energy attacks and returned them tenfold. Imperial forces reeled, their firepower rendered useless. Panic spread like wildfire through the ranks as the constructs advanced, their mere presence warping the battlefield with an oppressive hum. Elias acted quickly, rallying a small group of engineers and scientists. They worked frantically, stripping components from fallen alien drones and repurposing them into makeshift electromagnetic disruptors. It was a desperate, hastily cobbled-together solution, but it was all they had. As the constructs loomed closer, Elias led a strike team to deploy the disruptors. It was a suicide mission, or so the vanguard believed. Yet Elias moved with grim determination, every step calculated. He evaded the constructs' devastating attacks with narrow margins, his team following his lead as they planted the devices in critical positions. When the disruptors activated, the constructs faltered, their energy fields collapsing in a cascade of sparks and screeches. Imperial forces seized the moment, destroying the constructs with concentrated firepower. The battlefield fell silent, save for the crackling remnants of the constructs. As Elias returned to the lines, his armor scorched and his team bloodied but alive, he was met with a mix of astonishment and respect. Even Thaler offered a nod of acknowledgement. That night, as the fleet regrouped, Elias stood alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The war was far from over, but for the first time, there was a sliver of hope. The Empire's warriors were learning, adapting, not because of their training but because they were finally beginning to listen. Behind him, the door hissed open, and Vorex entered, his massive frame casting a shadow over the room. You've bought us time, Vorex said, his tone neither approving nor condemning. But time alone will not win this war. Elias turned, meeting the High Marshal's gaze. Then we'll need to do more than fight. We'll need to change. Vorex's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. He simply turned and left, leaving Elias to the silence of the void and the weight of what lay ahead. The final confrontation came sooner than anyone had anticipated. The alien forces, now fully aware of the Empire's growing resistance, launched an all-out assault on the strategic hub of the Valtiz system. This star system, with its massive relay stations and energy conduits, was the heart of the Empire's communication and supply network. If it fell, the Empire would be severed, scattered, and vulnerable. The Imperial fleet arrived just in time to witness the enemy's full strength. The void was a churning mass of alien ships, their organic forms pulsating with an eerie, rhythmic light. At their center loomed a structure unlike anything the Empire had ever seen, a monstrous, living fortress that radiated a palpable sense of malevolence. It was clear this was no mere battle. It was an ultimatum. Elias Kane stood in the war room aboard the Imperial flagship, surrounded by commanders and strategists who had come to respect, if not fully trust, his insights. A holographic display of the battlefield flickered before them, the sheer scale of the enemy forces drawing a grim silence. High Marshal Vorex broke it with a growl. "This is their last stand," he said, his voice ironclad. "We crush them here, or we are undone." Elias studied the hologram, his brow furrowed in concentration. He saw the fortress for what it was, not just a weapon but a nerve center, the key to the enemy's coordination. If they could destroy it, the rest of the alien forces would collapse into chaos. But the fortress was heavily shielded, surrounded by a seemingly endless swarm of defenders. A direct assault would be suicide. "We can't just hit it head-on," Elias said, his voice cutting through the room. "We need to draw their forces away, create a gap. Then we strike at the core." "And who do you propose leads this suicidal distraction?" Commander Thaler sneered, though his tone lacked its usual venom. "I will," Elias replied, his tone steady. The room fell silent. Even Vorex, who had grown accustomed to the human's audacity, looked at him with something akin to disbelief. "You're out of your mind," Thaler said, shaking his head. "You wouldn't last 5 minutes." "That's all I'll need," Elias said, his eyes fixed on the hologram. "The fortress is their brain. If we sever it, the body dies. But it's a gamble, and someone has to stack the odds." Vorex studied him for a long moment, the weight of command etched into his features. Finally, he nodded. "Do what you must. But if you fail, know that you take the galaxy with you." As the fleet moved into position, Elias prepared for what he knew might be his final mission. He chose a small, nimble strike craft, equipped with a prototype cloaking device cobbled together from captured alien technology. It wasn't perfect, but it was his best shot. Before boarding, he paused, looking out at the stars one last time. They seemed impossibly distant, fragile points of light against an overwhelming darkness. "Don't screw this up, Kane," Thaler said, appearing at his side. There was no mockery in his voice, only a rough-edged respect. Elias smirked. "Wouldn't dream of it." When the battle began, it was chaos. The Empire's forces surged forward in a massive offensive, engaging the alien swarms with everything they had. The Vanguard elite fought with renewed ferocity, their earlier doubts replaced by a grim determination. Amid the chaos, Elias's strike craft slipped through the cracks, cloaked and silent, weaving its way toward the fortress. The closer he got, the more oppressive the fortress became. Its organic hull pulsed with a sickly glow, and strange alien sounds echoed through his comm systems. Whispers, clicks, and unearthly screeches that set his teeth on edge. The fortress seemed alive, aware of his presence even through the cloak. Elias's craft shook violently as he neared his target, enemy drones swarming his position. The cloaking device sputtered, then failed entirely, leaving him exposed. He gritted his teeth, weaving through the onslaught with desperate precision. Every second counted, and he wasn't about to waste them. Reaching the fortress's surface, he deployed a series of high-yield charges designed to penetrate its outer layers. The fortress reacted instantly, tendrils of living metal lashing out to destroy him. Elias dodged, his craft battered but still intact. The charges detonated in a brilliant flash, creating a breach in the fortress's defenses. Elias didn't hesitate. He launched himself into the breach, abandoning the craft and diving into the fortress's interior. The environment was nightmarish, an ever-shifting maze of organic and mechanical structures, the walls pulsing as if alive. He moved quickly, planting more charges at critical points while evading the fortress's internal defenses. The comms crackled, Vorex's voice breaking through. "Kane, report. What's your status?" "Almost there," Elias replied, his voice strained. "Just keep them off me a little longer." The fortress seemed to sense his intent, its defenses growing more frantic. Alien drones swarmed him, their attacks relentless. Elias fought them off with everything he had, his movements fueled by sheer willpower. He reached the core, a pulsating, crystalline structure that radiated an almost hypnotic light. Without hesitation, he set the final charge. As he activated the timer, a sudden wave of energy knocked him off his feet. The core reacted violently, its light intensifying as if it were aware of its impending destruction. Elias staggered to his feet, his body screaming in protest. He had seconds to escape, and no clear path. Elias, Vorex's voice came through again, softer this time. You've done enough. Get out of there. Elias smiled faintly, even as the world around him began to collapse. Not sure that's in the cards, Marshal. But tell them we gave it everything. The charges detonated, a blinding explosion consuming the core. The fortress shuddered, then imploded, its destruction sending a shockwave through the alien fleet. Without their nerve center, the enemy forces faltered, their cohesion shattered. The Empire's forces seized the opportunity, driving them back and securing a hard-won victory. When the dust settled, Elias was gone, his sacrifice ensuring the survival of countless lives. In the days that followed, his name became legend. Among the vanguard, once dismissive of humanity, he was spoken of with reverence. On Earth, his story inspired a newfound unity and pride. And in the galaxy at large, humanity's place was forever changed. High Marshal Vorex stood alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. For the first time in his long, storied career, he felt something unfamiliar, a deep, abiding respect for a species he had once deemed insignificant. Elias Kane, he murmured to the void. A warrior like no other.